Most people open the Obsidian app and they immediately start typing notes. The emphasis for them is on capturing anything that seems important, which, to be honest, seems like a really good place to start. The problem is that after only a couple of weeks of this, they may have hundreds of notes that they can search for when they need to reference something, but other than sit in an archive, those notes don't actually do anything. Those notes feel isolated, lifeless, and dead. The truth is, a note without a link is just a file, and that file sits in a folder waiting to be remembered. But something magical happens in Obsidian when your notes start pointing to each other, and in this video, I'm going to show you every possible tool that you can use in Obsidian to do just that. Now, this video is the 7th video in my Obsidian for Beginners series. If you're new to Obsidian, this playlist is the place to start. You can find a link to the playlist in the description below, but for this video, I really want to unpack some key things you need to understand about linking your Obsidian notes that often gets overlooked. If you've ever been confused by linking or wondered if you were doing it wrong, then this video is for you. But before we get into the mechanics of linking your notes, let's talk briefly about why linking your notes and ideas matters in the first place. The best way I can communicate this is to describe the difference between note-taking and note-making. So with note-taking, you're simply focused on capturing notes in an archive somewhere. Once you capture those notes, they are usually static or unchanging, and as a result, they have limited future value. And this is the traditional way people manage their notes and ideas, where you capture things, you stick them in cold storage until you need them again. The way you interact with these types of notes is what I call the filing cabinet approach. Your notes may be nested several layers deep in a complex folder structure, and the only way these notes get resurfaced is if you go find them when you need them. Now, modern search tools make it easier to find things quickly, but still, you need to have the thought, then go find the note. And this has limited value when you're trying to get more out of your notes and ideas. So the other approach is called note making. This is where linking can really help you. With note making, you discover your notes as you browse through your vault. You can stumble on notes without having a clear path to them, and your notes also evolve and change over time, which means they have infinite potential future value. Most importantly, with note making, there is no hierarchy to your notes, so any note can connect to any other note in your vault. You no longer have to have the thought before going to dig up that note, and instead you can stumble upon old notes at serendipitous moments, especially if you take the time to craft some intentional links between your notes. The end result is a thinking system that helps you be more creative, which is best visualized using the graph view in Obsidian. With this graph view, you can see exactly which notes each note connects to. The connections are represented as light gray lines between two dots, and each dot represents a note in your Obsidian vault. Utilizing a concept known as bidirectional linking, each connection between notes represents either a link to or a link from a particular note. It's not quite the same as traditional wiki-style linking, where you might have a link from note A to note B, but no way to get back. In Obsidian and other connected notes apps that support this bidirectional linking, a single link provides a way from note A to note B, as well as a way back from note B to note A. This reduces a lot of the friction when making links between your notes, and a well-linked vault makes it much more likely that you'll stumble upon the right note at the right time. The bottom line? You want your notes to be able to find each other, and creating links is foundational to making that happen. So when we talk about linking notes in Obsidian, we're primarily talking about internal links, which are those double brackets that you'll occasionally see around words in your notes. The words between the brackets are usually the title of the note, and you can add an internal link in your note simply by typing double brackets and using autocomplete to find the note that you want to link to. You can also type the title of the note that you want to link to even if it doesn't exist yet, and that link will serve as a placeholder until the note is actually created. The text will be a little bit grayed out to indicate that this note doesn't exist yet, and you can create the new note simply by clicking on it, which is the same way that you navigate to a new note from the current one. Now, before we move on, I want to emphasize just how powerful that autocomplete feature is. This is the thing that makes linking notes feasible, in my opinion, as you don't ever need to manually type in the exact name of the note that you want to link to. It's really handy, especially if you don't know the exact name of the note that you want to link to, as you can use this autocomplete feature, kind of like a search field, to locate it. You can also link to a specific heading in a note by selecting the note you want to link to and inserting the # character, which then gives you a list of all the headers in the note. Just select the one that you want to link to and hit the Enter key. Then when you click on the internal link, it will take you straight to that section in the link note when you click on it. You can also link to specific blocks of text, but this gets messy and it adds this weird number identifier to your notes. So I generally don't recommend that you use this unless you have a specific workflow that requires it. And lastly, you can change the text that is displayed in a link if you insert a pipe character after the note title and type the text that you want to show instead. I use this feature all the time in LifeHQ for links to my dashboards, as Canvas files always have a .canvas file extension that is visible when adding this internal link. But by using the pipe character, I can provide clean links to the dashboards in all the documentation like so. In addition to linking to a note by using double brackets around the note title, you can also embed the contents of a note in the current note by adding an exclamation point right before those double brackets. The technical term for this is transclusion, but it basically just embeds the contents of the linked note in the place where the link exists. I use this all the time for my sermon sketch notes, where I'll put my sketch note at the top of the note, then I'll transclude or embed each of the individual verses that are mentioned in that sketch note. So this creates links to those notes that I can use to navigate back and forth between them. Transcluding notes is also a great way to pull together information from multiple notes into a single place. For example, I do this in my personal retreat template file. I did a whole video on the personal retreat process if you want to dive deeper here, but the template file pulls in and embeds the contents of both my life theme note and my core values note. And this makes them easy to review whenever I do my personal retreat in Obsidian. And if I make any edits to those embedded notes, those changes instantly show up in the note where they are embedded as well. Now, regardless of whether you use standard internal links or you've embedded the contents of your notes using that transclusion feature we just mentioned, the bidirectional link between your notes gets created the exact same way and is now visible in the graph view. Now, when most people talk about the graph view, they're talking about the big graph view, which you can open by clicking on the button in the ribbon. But aside from looking cool, I think this actually has limited usefulness, and 99% of the time, I use the local graph instead. So to open the local graph, you can either run the open local graph command from the command palette, or click the three dots on the upper right of the note title bar and select Open Linked View, Open Local Graph. This will open the local graph in a split tab and show you all the notes that either link to or are linked from the current note. But if you drag that local graph into either the left or right sidebar, it gives you now a dynamic interface element that automatically updates based on the contents of that active note. So let's go back to that sermon sketch notes example I mentioned earlier. So here you can see all the individual verses which exist in my vault as their own atomic notes. I've linked to those from this particular sermon sketch note. Now from here, I can click on one of these dots in the local graph to go to that note in my vault, and the local graph now updates and shows all of the other notes that this verse is connected to. So from here, I can click on another sketch note file or command click to open it in a new tab, and the local graph updates again. This basically gives me a connected web of all my sermon sketch notes that I've been collecting since 2017, and it lets me build out my own cross-reference library. But that's just one very specific example, and the larger point I want you to get is this. The local graph is a very powerful way to navigate your notes and discover new connections that you may not have seen before. And the more intentionally you link your notes together inside of your Obsidian Vault, the more powerful that local graph becomes. Now, one other thing you really need to understand about linked notes is the linked and unlinked mentions. These are visible by default in the right sidebar, and they're visible in both the outgoing links and the backlinks, though the backlinks is where I find this most useful. The linked mentions section shows all of the other notes in your vault that contain a direct link to the active note, which is what we mean when we use that term backlink. It's a link back to the active note. But the unlinked mentions section shows all the other places in your Obsidian Vault where the exact text from your note title exists, giving you a bunch of suggestions for places where you might want to create an internal link back to that current note. Now, personally, I believe these links serve your vault best when you're selective about where and when you add them. So I recommend that you only create links here that really mean something. But to do this, you can just hover over the spot in the unlinked mention where you want the link to be created and click the button to link the file. Obsidian will take it from there, add the double brackets around the text in the other file for you, and you've now got a direct connection between those two notes. Now, one last thing to know about note links is that you can also use aliases to create links. Aliases are a built-in property type in Obsidian where you can set an alternate title for the note that you want to link to. These show up when you use the autocomplete and unlinked mention features as well. But internal links aren't the only way to make connections between your notes in Obsidian. There's a couple of other ways that you can group things together, the big ones being folders and tags. Now, I actually did a whole video on the different ways that you can connect notes in Obsidian a while back. You can check that video out here if you want to dive a little deeper into the philosophy behind how to use the different tools. But I do want to touch briefly on it here as it pertains to folders and tags, because it can be a little confusing sometimes to figure out when you should create a link versus when you should use a folder versus when you should use a tag. So here's how I differentiate between these. First, I use folders for putting similar notes together. For me, folders are for grouping things by type. So for example, I have folders in my vault where I keep all my video scripts or newsletters together in one place. Key limitation with folders is that it's a physical location and a note can only exist in one place at a time. So while folders are great for projects, archives, reference material, meeting notes, and lots of other ways you may want to group things based on what those notes actually are, it's not enough and you're going to need other tools in your PKM toolbox to really create order and structure in your vault. The next type of tool is tags, which are fundamentally different from folders because you can apply as many tags as you want. You can only have one folder for a note, but you can have unlimited tags. However, just like everything else, I recommend you don't go crazy adding these. Create a clear tagging structure that makes sense to you and use those tags intentionally. To help you with that, here are a couple of simple rules to follow when crafting your own tagging system. First, tag consistently. If you're going to use a tag for something, make sure that you use it the same way every time. If you don't, your tag searches aren't going to be useful because they won't show you everything that you're looking for. Second, tag sparingly. It's very easy to overdo it with tags, but just like backlinks, less is often more. So not every note needs a tag, but every note that has a tag needs to mean something. And then third, tag memorably. Just like PKM as a whole, tagging is very personal. So your tags don't need to make sense to anyone else but you. And the more memorable those tags are, the more likely you are to use them. Now, there are also a couple of best practices that apply to both tags and properties, which can help you avoid some messy duplicates and make sure that you're able to find things when you need them. So let's go over these quickly. First, don't use spaces in your tags. This can get really messy if you try to use tags inline, so try to keep all your tag text together whenever possible. Second, keep all your tags lowercase. Obsidian does a pretty good job of combining tags together. For example, hashtag lowercase j journal and hashtag uppercase j journal will be combined, but it's a good habit to always use the same capitalization formatting when tagging. The easiest way to make sure you don't mess this up, in my opinion, is to keep everything lowercase. Third, always use singular tags. A common mistake is to use plurals when using note level tags. For example, hashtag books instead of hashtag book. But if you have both hashtag books and hashtag book in your vault, that will actually create two separate tags and it's going to decrease the likelihood that your query shows you everything that you're looking for. So to prevent this, I always use singular tags. And lastly, just like when creating internal links, utilize that autocomplete when you're tagging. The built-in autocomplete tool is your best friend, letting you select an existing tag so you don't accidentally spell something wrong and create a new tag by accident. Now, by the way, you can also nest your tags. For example, I nest my different types of journal entries underneath a top-level journal tag. So when I apply a gratitude tag, it always looks something like hashtag journal/gratitude. Just keep in mind that tagging this way actually applies two tags. It applies a tag to both the parent and child tags. So journal/gratitude actually applies a tag to both the journal tag and the gratitude tag. So nesting tags like this can help you keep your tag pane organized, but it also results in a lot of instances of that top level tag. It's not necessarily a big deal, but it is something you should be aware of. All right, that's quite a bit to process if you're new to this, I know. So let me just conclude this video with a simple explanation of what I consider to be the best starting place for getting started with linking your notes in Obsidian. So first, don't try to link everything. The problem when you have too many links is that you don't know which ones are the good ones, so you end up wasting a lot of time surfing through things before you find something that is actually valuable. So create those internal links intentionally and only when it feels natural. If you got a specific workflow in mind where you might need to leverage those connections in the future, like my personal cross-reference library that I shared earlier, that is even better. Next, when adding structure to your vault, follow this pattern. First, create some folders to add some broad structure, but you don't need to go nuts with this. And in fact, your final folder structure should evolve as you use your vault, a lot like the desire paths between the buildings on college campuses. So don't try to figure it all out ahead of time, and don't try to cram your notes and ideas into a specific folder system. Just create a couple of folders at the beginning for the natural groupings that you see as you look at the notes in your Obsidian Vault. Next, add some tags that can help you organize things by themes. Don't use nested tags unless you see a clear reason to do so, and follow the rules and best practices that I shared with you earlier. Just create a couple to start that you can add to your notes that will make them a bit easier to stumble upon in the future. Once you got that down, go ahead and start creating more internal links in your notes to emphasize the explicit connections you want to create between them. Remember though, less is more, so make them count. Use the regular internal links and only embed notes when it saves repetition and you have a clear reason to do so. And lastly, I recommend that you make regular note making a habit. Even just 20 to 30 minutes per week where you're browsing your vault and you're updating your notes helps you keep things fresh. So add links where you see value, and over time your vault will evolve into a thinking partner for doing your best creative work instead of being a dusty old archive where good ideas go to die. Consistent note making is the key to unlocking the full potential of your connected notes over time. All right, so that'll do it for this video on linking notes in Obsidian. If you want more Obsidian tips, templates, and resources, check out my free Obsidian Starter Vault. You can download it for free right now if you go to vault.practicalpkm.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in another video.